Hello. So I'm very happy today to host this INSOL Europe coffee break for Luxembourg. And I'm very happy to have Yann Baden and Laurent, who are both prominent insolvency practitioners in Luxembourg. And Yann, you are now the president of the Association Luxembourgeoise des Mandataires de Justice, which has been recently created. And I think we are all very happy in Luxembourg that this association now exists. And Laurent, in fact, you are a member of this association as an insolvency practitioner. So you are both lawyers as well. And today, I mean, we are here to speak a little bit of what will happen next for the profession in light of the directive, but also in light of, well, let's say, I mean, the potential huge wave of insolvencies due to the COVID-19 related economic and financial crisis. So in 2020, figures show that in Luxembourg, the number of insolvencies was quite equivalent to the one of the previous years. It's probably due to the government measures which were put in place to help businesses. Do you think we will also have a huge number of cases, new cases in Luxembourg this year?
So maybe I can start off. Thank you very much for having me. So yes, we have been seeing a very strange year this last year with the coronavirus and everything turning around it, and that has a certain impact on insolvencies. And as has happened in many European countries, the government has taken a certain number of measures to make sure that there were not too many insolvencies, or at least to help streamline the process of insolvencies and of businesses going out of business. As a result of these measures taken by the government, Luxembourg has seen that the insolvencies in 2020 have not taken a huge step from 2019. In fact, the figures are nearly identical, and I see this is. I think this is the same thing you see in most of our neighboring countries, which have also taken similar steps, and the numbers of insolvencies in these countries has had a similar tendency as it has in Luxembourg. Now, the coronavirus situation is hopefully coming to an end soon. And with the health crisis coming to an end, there will be also an end to a certain number of measures that the government has put in place. And I don't think that the government will let drop the bomb from one day to another. So there will be a slow takedown of measures that were put in place. And the question then is whether that will trigger a wave of insolvencies or not. I think a lot of businesses, small and less small, are struggling over this period of time. And there is a very real question of insolvencies for a lot of those businesses. My personal feeling is that we will not be seeing a wave of insolvencies, but we will be seeing a steady stream of insolvencies over the year, starting from the moment where the government will take down its measures until the businesses have been able to reorganize themselves. Will this steady stream be very important? I think it will be more important than we have seen in 2020. It will probably be a little bit more important than in 2019, but I don't think that we will be facing a huge wave of business collapses. There are certainly areas which will be more impacted than others, but I don't think we will be seeing a huge wave.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with Yann's analysis. I think that's exactly how things are likely to happen. one aspect we can add, and that really also gives an indication as to what will happen in the future, like in the next 2 to 3 years, is that the sanitary situation has put a big strain on a number of businesses that have been in distress or that have not been very successful for the past whatever number of years, maybe 5 or 10 years, and it's really revealing these weaknesses. So I think that, you know, if businesses have been unsuccessful or mildly unsuccessful for a long period of time, they are likely to suffer more and to suffer and to fall eventually with this drip that is just the one too much. And I think exactly that will not happen in one go, but will happen over time. And maybe another aspect is what we see now is that there are a lot of efforts in refinancings by institutional lenders going on, and they are very eager to stay out of court. So I think Luxembourg has this specific situation to have, on the one hand, a national and a local economy, and then also to be a hub for international financing structures. And those have never been, I think, very much inclined to force their borrowers into bankruptcy, but rather to find out of court type of solutions and restructurings to the extent possible. And we see some activity there, but not the wave of restructurings that we had expected just 6 months ago.
Yes, certainly. I mean, I fully agree. And do you think, well, of course, we will not have this wave, but still, I mean, we will probably have more cases. So do you think we will have just enough insolvency practitioners and, of course, professionals to face this increase?
So I think in the past, we could always distinguish essentially two types, roughly speaking, two types of insolvencies. Small businesses which went into insolvency, which required simply liquidation of assets and distribution to creditors, and then more complex ones, which might be subject to restructuring, but which might also be subject to bigger deals in terms of getting the business going again or getting parts of the business sold rather than liquidation of assets as such. And of course, now the kind of liquidators and trustees that you require for those two types of insolvencies is hugely different. And in the past, we have had, I believe, sufficient numbers of people, of professionals being able to deal with these two types of insolvencies. Now, I believe that in the first part of the post-COVID insolvencies, we will be facing much of the first type of insolvencies, so small businesses that go into insolvency that require a simple liquidation of assets and distribution to creditors. And I think for those, we certainly have enough professionals at hand for the moment being. It's, of course, always a little bit difficult to foresee the exact amount of insolvencies coming our way. But I think if things behave more or less normal in expectation of the COVID situation, I think the profession should be able to handle it without too many difficulties. Now, for the latter type of insolvencies, the situation is a little bit different. There are much fewer professionals capable of handling those type of insolvencies. They are available, but there being a fewer number of these professionals available, that means that if there is any kind of wave of these type of insolvencies, the situation might become a little bit more difficult. However, I do not expect such a wave to happen or an increase of numbers to happen overnight. It is something which will develop a little bit further down the road, because it will not be the immediate concern of those types of businesses. And then we will have to see, but I expect that our professionals will be able to do whatever is required to get the job done.
Yeah, I hope you're right, Yann. I also hope you're wrong. No, I fully agree. I think that's the situation. We don't really know whether there will be enough or not enough, but we have proven as a place sufficient flexibility and availability of talented people for all types of liquidations in the past, and I don't think that will that was the case in 2008, 2009. It's the case now, and there is more and more people, I think, that have also taken the view that insolvency and restructuring is a full-time job. It's a different type of job than advice. It's replacing to some extent management for the purpose of liquidation. So I think that there is more people coming into the scene with specific knowledge about this or that type of whatever banking or financing or trade businesses or international or local business. I think there's a pool of talents available.
Great. So let's speak about the directive now. So the directive in restructuring and insolvency, it's not implemented in Luxembourg yet. So I will be glad to hear your views on the directive, especially considering that Luxembourg has always been, let's say, a pro-creditor jurisdiction, where restructuring proceedings for now have been rarely used. So what do you think we can expect in terms of implementation, in particular about the profession? Do you think we will have a new profession? Do you think that the profession will be restructured? Especially as most of the time, I mean, lawyers are appointed. Do you think that as lawyers we will be equipped to let's say, be this new profession with regards to the directive? Yann, maybe?
So let's start with the obvious. The obvious being there is a directive. The directive requires that national law be changed, and that will happen. Is it a good thing? Well, that is up for debate. We in Luxembourg, we have had a legislation which is now a little bit older. Our current legislation goes back 200 years, but we have seen that it is a legislation which is highly adaptable, in as much as it hasn't foreseen a lot of things, and skilled practitioners were able to use it in the best possible way. It is true that Luxembourg has been a pro-creditor country and pro-creditor legislation. That is about to change to an extent. But again, I think we need to go back in history, and maybe not all the way back, but there have been a certain number of financial crises of sorts in the late 1900s, in between the two world wars, in 2008, and each and every time governments, and our Luxembourg government as well, has tried to implement legislation in order to save businesses and to restructure businesses rather than to put them into insolvencies. If we are anything to learn from history, it is that none of these measures has had any impact on the businesses and on the economy. Why am I being so negative? I am being so negative because I believe that while there is a huge amount of good in restructuring businesses that are failing, it is not seeing that insolvencies are not the actual culprit of economic problems. Insolvencies are only the symptom, and combating an insolvency is not going to solve anything in terms of difficulties in the economy of a country. Quite to the contrary, the insolvency has a useful purpose in terms of turning over assets, keeping businesses, and making businesses thrive. A business which is badly failing because it has had difficulties for a certain number of years, as Laurent has pointed out previously, and now as a result of the coronavirus, it comes to fail with some finality, is such a business cannot at the end of the day be saved and restructured. It is doomed to fail, and it is better that it fails, that the assets are sold, new businesses are created, rather than there is a fruitless attempt to restructure the business and then see that it goes down the drain a number of years further on. So I think the question of restructuring, especially in a tiny economy as Luxembourg has it, is a very difficult one. We are going to see the directive be passed into national legislation. It is going to have an impact on how the insolvency practitioners do their business. We will be trying to live by the letter and the sword of the directive. I believe professionals are going to try to restructure businesses as best as they can. I don't believe it is going to be a huge success for the reasons that I have already stated. I would add to that Luxembourg, being a very small country, restructuring is going to be very difficult. It is going to be a change from a pro-creditor stance, because the business that is going to be saved is going to mean haircuts to creditors and things like that. Is it going to have a huge impact on the profession? Yes, it is going to have a huge impact on the profession. The profession will have to adapt. But I do believe that the practitioners that are today in place, or many of those, and especially those with legal background, have a better than average chance of succeeding in that new business, if I may call it this, because they come equipped with a lot of knowledge and experience, and they have always the possibility to take advice from other professions if required. So if you compare it to other countries where the professionals in restructuring are not lawyers, but other professionals, I do believe that our way to do business has a more than fair chance of doing a good job at what is coming our way. It will be difficult. There will be many things to adapt, but I think it will be, we will be able to manage that. I'm very positive.
Great. I mean, it's good to hear. Laurent, what do you have?
I hear what Yann says. I agree with many of his analysis. I still think that the directive is and I don't think that he said the contrary, but I think it's an important piece of work that will trigger a lot of things. Adapting legislation will be one of them. And I don't think that the implementation in Luxembourg the first time around will necessarily be the happy one, the one that we will be proud of, and the one that we will see in 15 or 20 years if we keep our legislation as long as we did last time. So I think the shift from pro-creditor, which is, it's easily said, but if you speak to creditors in Luxembourg, people who are owed money in Luxembourg, they're not all going to say that they're pro-creditor. Definitely the country is not pro-debtor, pro-entrepreneur, has not been, as a feeling, overall feeling in these procedures. But it's also not really pro-creditor. They have very little to say, they have very little to decide, they have very little to, so far. So that is likely to change for the good on some aspects and for the bad, depending on the perspective on other ones. So I think that the directive and the work that the legislator will need to do in Luxembourg will it will be a new type of slightly changing type of framework where the perspective will be slightly different, and where I agree with Yann when he says that you can't save every business. I fully agree, but putting in place a different mindset and a different way of looking at businesses and measuring their success in the first place is also likely to encourage restructurings at an earlier stage, or haircuts, or discussions, or I think that it's generally a good thing to get out of the finger pointing type of logic in terms of when it comes to commercial success of a small business or a big business or a big finance operation. It doesn't really matter. I think the finger pointing has never proven to be very effective, and it is not going to give the value to the creditors that they often could have if the structure had been less morally tainted, less failure focused, and more, yes, we have a problem, let's do something out of it, what are the options? So discussing options at an earlier stage is something that in general could be a good outcome from the implementation of this directive. Another thing is probably that Luxembourg has a role to play. It can, I think Luxembourg, and I don't have a crystal ball, I'm not sure which way we will be going, but I think that there is a possibility that we could use as a country, as a jurisdiction, the new tools to attract restructurings from larger groups in this restructuring business, where the courts of some jurisdictions have always been trying to play an important role. So that has very little to do with the quality of the legislation. That's a commercial thing for a nation. But I think that if we, rather than half-heartedly implementing the directive by the letter, we focus on our old strength to have little legislation and then to adapt it with talented professionals, as Yann put it, and inventive courts. That has a big attraction potentially to creditors and debtors in other jurisdictions to come to Luxembourg and to do their restructuring or whatever it is they will be doing in Luxembourg. So I don't think that will happen immediately. There will be two problems, but this would be my wish, at least.
Maybe one just last quick question. The directive foresees, well, quite a lot of, let's say, liability or responsibility risk, which will be on the shoulders of the practitioner. And well, it also foresees in the recitals that the insolvency practitioner will have to maintain a liability insurance. What are your views on this?
Maybe if I can start out, liability for insolvency practitioners is always a difficult and big proposition. Why is that so? Well, it is in the nature of the activities the insolvency practitioner is doing. He's being parachuted into an entity that he doesn't know anything about, and he is supposed to take the good and right decisions right from the get-going. And there's a lot at stake. there are creditors, there are employees, there are state creditors, there's the entrepreneur, and so on and so forth. And by the virtue of there being an insolvency, the practitioner cannot do it right for everybody. So he is in a difficult position right from the get-go. He comes into a new business he doesn't know. He has to make hard choices which are not going to satisfy everybody. And then now with the new directive, he's supposed to guide all of this into a new business or a restructured business so that the business can live on. I think this is asking a lot of restructuring and insolvency practitioners. They are happy to do so, but the burden of liability has always been an important burden and will become even more so. Do they need to have insurance? Of course, they do need to have insurance. We will need to see many years down the road how the courts are going to apply this in practice. But it is something which, as a profession, we should be very much aware of, because you cannot have it many ways. You cannot have the best insolvency practitioners with the heaviest liability and without being paid in proportion to what they engage in. So you need to stay aware of the fact that you are in a web of contradictory requirements, which make the person in the middle of that web, which puts him in a very difficult position. And that is what is being asked of the practitioners at this stage. So we as an organization, but I think also the legislator, when he is going to adapt the directive, needs to be aware of what they are asking for and making sure that that is what we are able to provide, given the liabilities, the insurance, and the requirements for everybody.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Very, very briefly, I've just asked for an insurance coverage in the bankruptcy I'm managing, and you know the quotes you're getting are just scary, because very often if you're dealing with large operations, you know, even if you don't have millions and millions of assets, you may have millions and millions of liability, and that is your liabilities in the bankruptcy debt. And that will be your liability to some extent to be able to explain why you haven't recovered more or less, why you have done it this way and the other way, and in the context of, as Yann put it, of even a less clear framework where a lot of options can be taken, where you're not only managing the liquidation but also driving a process forward. There is a lot of liabilities that can be triggered. So I think it's, on the one hand, one thing to avoid to shooting on the liquidator. That is a tendency that can be seen in other jurisdictions, and we should avoid that. And for that, I think the best thing is to have well prepared people and work on a consensus base with all the stakeholders in the liquidation. That is probably the best way to protect yourself in a way. So I believe that it also is about discussing whether these different liabilities should be encapsulated in a different profession, or whether this is just business as usual, and trying to work our way around all types of liabilities that we have as insolvency practitioners. Today, largely lawyers, but tomorrow maybe also accountants and other insolvency practitioners from other horizons. So I think it's an important question. I don't have an answer, but I think that very often the liability issue is one that becomes very painful if the profession is not organized in a way to satisfy or to give the right outcome to people, where you build up frustration in your processes. Then people start looking around for the culprits and shooting at the ones who are there. I don't want to be that person, of course. So I think it's also our duty to build up smooth processes with predictable outcomes that allow us to avoid, to the extent possible, liability claims just because the stakeholders are frustrated by the process more than by the person in charge of it.
And I would add to that as we are a small country, and certainly already now, but certainly even more so when we are discussing restructuring, we are going to have a lot of contact with foreign countries and foreign jurisdictions. And there's a liability issue is maybe even more of a problem for Luxembourg practitioners. And this is an issue which the insurers normally are very, very much afraid of for obvious reasons. So that is another angle which we need to take into consideration, particularly in Luxembourg, because we are so small and because every insolvency has contact with a foreign jurisdiction. And this is likely to increase in complexity and in number if we are speaking restructuring.
Yeah.
No, for sure, for sure. Well, this coffee break comes to an end. So many thanks to both of you for your time and for your views on these very important questions. Many thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.